Okay, welcome to the third part of our review series, Review 1.2. Today in our rhythm warm-up, we'll be continuing our exploration of 3/4 time. We'll be also continuing our 2-5-1 progression exercise, looking at the keys of G flat, D flat, and A flat major today. And for our reading, we'll be checking out something a little different. Up until this point, our 2-5-1 readings have been more on the jazz side of things, but today I wanted to show us that we can get a more diverse range of sounds out of the 2-5-1 progression, and so I did my best to emulate the styles of Debussy, and I created kind of an abstract progression using 2-5-1s, and hence we get the Prelude in 6 keys. Now remember, you can always find all of this material, all of these outlines, and all of the sheet music on my website, pianodojo.com. I really appreciate you all who are watching these videos, and you can help support the Piano Dojo by subscribing to this channel or sharing it with anybody who is looking for answers about the piano. But now, let's head over to the drum and get rhythmically warmed up. Let's get started on rhythm warm-up number 45. We'll start on line 1 at 60 BPM, and the clicks of the metronome will represent all 3 of the upbeats. Let's do it. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. Switch hands. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. Top line hands together. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Moving on to line 2, we're going to speed up to 66 BPM, but we're actually going to be cutting out some of the metronome clicks. So the metronome will be cut down to 22 BPM, we'll be moving at 66 BPM, and the metronome is now going to represent the first downbeat of every measure. Let's give it a try. One, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Switch hands. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Top on hands together. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okie dokie. Moving on to line 3, we are going to speed our metronome up to 24, which means we will actually be moving at 72 BPM, and now the metronome click is going to represent the second downbeat of each measure. Let's give it a try. One, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Switch hands. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Top line. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Again, that one was a little bit sparse, and sometimes the ones with the least amount of notes are the hardest because we have to really internalize the beat there. Finally, moving on to line 4, we are going to speed our metronome up to 27, which means we will be moving at 81 BPM, and now the clicks of the metronome are going to represent the third downbeat of each measure. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Switch hands. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Top on hands together. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now that we are rhythmically warmed up, let's head back over to the piano for the rest of the lesson. For our 2-5-1 review today, we will be looking at G flat, D flat, and A flat major. Again, this is only ever going to be written down in the key of C because it is really up to us to take this concept and internalize it on our instrument, okay? So while I will not write this out for you in all 12 keys, we will play them together on the piano in all 12 keys. Today, looking at G flat, D flat, and A flat. Let's go ahead and check it out. Let's get started on our exercise today with the key of G flat major. Our 2 is going to be an A flat minor. Then we're going to inversion blend that to a D flat dominant. And finally, we'll do our G flat major. Our scales are going to be A flat Dorian, D flat Mixolydian, and G flat major. All together, that's going to look like this: A flat minor, D flat dominant, and G flat major. Okay, let's take a look at D flat major. Our 2 is going to be E flat minor. Then we're going to inversion blend that to an A flat dominant 7. And finally, we're going to get our D flat major 7. Our scales are going to be E flat Dorian, A flat Mixolydian, and D flat major. All together, that's going to look like this: E flat minor 7, A flat dominant 7, and D flat major 7. And finally, let's take a look at A flat major. Our 2 is going to be B flat minor. We're going to inversion blend that to our E flat dominant 7th chord, and then from there we'll go to our A flat major 7. Our scales will be B flat Dorian, E flat Mixolydian, and A flat major. And all together that's going to look like this: B flat minor 7, E flat dominant 7, and A flat major 7. Remember that you can take as much time to digest this as possible. You don't need to go as fast as me. You can take your time, do it nice and slow. Think about it like hand and finger yoga. The most important thing is not the speed, it is that we are digesting these shapes on the keyboard. Now here we have today's reading, the Prelude in 6 keys, emulating the style of Debussy. So we've got a little bit of an impressionistic vibe, and one of the reasons why I really like that is because while the impressionistic style is rooted in classical harmony, it also bends the rules, and when you want to write a prelude in 6 keys with only 2 pages, it's a pretty good style to do. It is in 6 keys, but the key signature is only going to change twice, okay? So we're going to be in the key of G flat, we're going to be in the key of C, and then we're going to return over here to the key of G flat. Now before we actually dive in to these notes, I made a guide that can more succinctly describe what's going on here. So let's take a look at this guide, and then we'll return back to these notes to see how we actually made that work. So what we started out with is a 2-5-1 to the key of G flat major. Then we're going to change the color of that G flat major, and it is going to become a minor chord. So we're going to change the G flat major into an F sharp minor, which will then become the 2 of a different key. So what we're going to be doing is moving to the key of E at that point. And we're going to repeat this process. We're going to repeat this process until we get back to G flat major. And when you map it all out, this is what we get, okay? So we start out with our 2-5-1 to the key of G flat. Then the G flat becomes a minor chord, which takes us from a 2-5-1 to the key of E. Then the E becomes a minor chord, which takes us on a 2-5-1 to the key of D. Then the D becomes minor, which takes us on a 2-5-1 to the key of C. The C then becomes minor, which takes us on a 2-5-1 to B flat. The B flat becomes minor, which takes us on a 2-5-1 to A flat. And finally, the process repeats. We get back to A flat minor, which is our 2-5 to our original key of G flat major. Now the cool thing is, if you take a look at all of these tonal centers that we approach, and we put those on the keyboard, we get a very familiar pattern. Let's take a look. So if we start on a G flat, our next tonal center is going to be an E. Our next tonal center will be a D. Our next tonal center will be C, followed by B flat, A flat, and finally back to G flat. What is this? What is this wonderful shape? It is the whole tone scale, right? So all of the tonal centers in this piece, when played one after another, give us our whole tone scale, and each one of these tonal centers is going to have its corresponding 2-5-1. Okay, this is the part of the video with the spoilers. So if you like a little bit of an extra challenge, go ahead and pause the video right now and do your best to locate the 6 tonal centers of the whole tone scale that we talked about in this piece. But if you'd like to just jump in with me, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to locate all 6 of these tonal centers, and then we're going to back up and see how each of those centers was approached by a 2-5-1. And here they are, our 6 tonal centers. So we start out with our G flat. The next tonal center is going to move over down here to our E. The tonal center after that is going to be D. Then we have our C. Our B flat is going to happen right here. A flat will occur right here. And finally, we'll return to our G flat down here on our last system. Now, as I mentioned, each one of these is going to be approached by a 2-5-1. So let's go ahead and look at how that works. Now here are all of the 2-5s that are going to lead to those tonal centers. So as you can see, a lot of times there's quite a bit of flip-flopping between the 2 and the 5 before you actually do arrive at the 1. But let's talk a little bit about how these chords are spelled out, okay? So, you know, one of the magical things about Debussy is that although he gets an incredible sound and he has this really cool thing going on, a lot of times his voicings are pretty simple. And if you'll look at a lot of the ways that I voice these chords, I'm not using anything other than the basic chord tones, but I'm spreading them out in interesting ways. Okay, so as you're playing through this piece, I really want you to take a look at how the notes in each of these voicings corresponds to the idea of the chord, and how there really aren't too many fancy notes in there, and a lot of times I'm really just relying on creative organizations of the 4 basic chord tones in our 7th chords. One of the things that you're going to notice is that some of the spellings of these chords get a little bit weird, and that's because I didn't want to go ahead and change the key signature for all of the tonal centers. Like I said at the very beginning, there's only 2 actual key signatures to this piece, and they happen to be a tritone apart, right? So if you're going to have 6 different keys, I figured why not just cut it right in half. The tritone kind of perfectly separates that, so we have G flat and C, right? So here in this circle on the approach to E, technically the 2-5 to E is F sharp minor 7 to B7, but you'll see in those 2 measures that there are some creative spellings of F sharp minor because we're in the key of G flat, and I kind of just wanted to work with that. So this is a good example of why it is important to really internalize the shapes of your 2-5-1s on your instrument, because sometimes composers get a little tricky and break those darn rules on notation, and you really just need to fall back on understanding these shapes on the keyboard, because, you know, sometimes it doesn't matter what it's written as on the paper. if you have those shapes in your mind, it's always going to be the same thing on the keys. And that's one way that I get out of a lot of tricky reading situations is I'll be like, why did they write it this way? But that's okay because I know what these shapes are, I've practiced them, and I can just go ahead and do it. I'll just pull it out of my vocabulary, all right? So you will see some creative spellings of 251s that are not in their perfect state, and that was because I'm kind of working with trying to fit 6 keys into only 2 key signatures, but that's why it's important that we thoroughly do our 251 exercises so that we can ultimately have the shapes on the piano in our vocabulary. Also, another creative spelling of the E minor to A7, right? Using a lot of different flats. Watch out for C flat, right? We have C flat at this point. So we're gonna, watch out for that when you play that all of these times right here. Finally, we get into a little bit of a more friendly key signature here in the key of C, so it gets a little bit more clear. You can see that there are a few times where I added chords in that were not a 251, and I needed to give myself a little bit of wiggle room in here so that it didn't sound totally monotonous. Sometimes I didn't want to always just shift from the major sound and then immediately just turn that into its minor version to become a 2. It almost became too predictable. So sometimes I would use maybe like the minor 3 or the minor 5 to sort of, more creatively shift the ear into hearing what was just the tonal center, and now it suddenly has become a minor chord, which is going to start functioning immediately as the 2 for another tonal center. So yes, I did use a couple chords that are not 251s, but I mean, for the most part, I really did just use a lot of 251s in this piece. We'll notice over here, oh, and here's another one, right? But over here, we've got this fun little pedal tone section, right? Before you finally do go down to our 5 of A flat. This fun thing is something I love to do. It looks cool, but it's very easy. It's just the A flat major pentatonic scale, and it's being started a 5th apart, right? So in your left hand, you're gonna play the A flat major pentatonic scale starting on A flat. In your right hand, you're gonna play the A flat major pentatonic scale, but you're gonna be starting from E flat, and then you just extrapolate that all the way up to the keyboard until you get up to our very high C and our very high A flat. And then we do have a return to our original section that's gonna end the piece for us in the key of G flat. Now, the thing about this style is that you could call this what's called through composed. Okay, it's not exactly a sonata form. It does have a circular format where we do end where we began, but you'll notice that a lot of this material is just constantly permutating. I mean, we have 6 key centers. That's not very common, right? And so each key center almost has its own little characteristic instead of constantly repeating stuff that has been done. And that is called being through composed, when the piece is just constantly evolving and not really repeating material, maybe until you get to the very end where you can sometimes end where you began. The last thing that I want to point out, and maybe it should have been the first thing, but look at this. We are in 9/8. And for those of you who have dabbled in some Debussy, you'll be very familiar with probably one of his most famous tunes ever, the Clair de Lune, right? Which is in 9/8. And so I figured, why not? Let's do it. Let's make a 9/8. We are looking at that feeling of 3/4 in our rhythm warm-ups. And this is kind of like just 3 groups of 3 per measure, right? So we're getting good at feeling 3. Here we have 9/8, so it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. And now that we've picked the piece apart theoretically and explained what's going on, let's take a listen to how it sounds on the piano. And there you have it. We are 3/4 of the way through our review. We only have one more episode left in our review process. As always, thank you so much for watching, and if you'd like to support the Piano Dojo, you can do so, of course, by subscribing and sharing this channel with anybody who is looking for answers about the piano. You can also find all of these show notes and all of this material for sale on my website, pianodojo.com. So please visit the website where you can stay tuned for all of the latest Piano Dojo news. And until next time, happy practicing.